Eliana Brooks knew something was wrong the moment she saw the readings on the orbital telescope display. She had monitored cosmic signals for years, listening to the quiet hum of the solar system from her post aboard the Laennec orbital station, located high above Earth. Usually, it was just background noise, radio waves from distant pulsars, echoes of solar flares, or static from cosmic dust. But this pattern was different. It was orderly, deliberate. A set of signals repeated at regular intervals, showing fluctuations that no natural object would produce. At first, she thought it could be an experimental drone swarm. Such top-secret projects weren't unheard of, and governments didn't always inform civilian stations about everything. But the scope of this formation went well beyond anything she had seen. It wasn't just a handful of vessels. It was a fleet. She ran the signal through every database on file, scanning for known allied or commercial spacecraft. She checked for any identification tags authorized by the Global Aviation and Orbital Authority. Nothing matched. Whoever was out, there was traveling under no recognized signal or flight plan. Yet their approach was carefully orchestrated. "Dr. Brooks?" came a voice through her headset. It belonged to one of her junior colleagues. "We're seeing them on thermal now. There must be at least 36 ships heading toward the inner solar system." Eliana swallowed hard. She tapped on her console, pulling up magnified images. There were definite heat signatures, each roughly the size of an interplanetary transport or bigger. The shapes were sharp, angular, warships. Her stomach tightened. Laennec Orbital Station was a joint international facility focusing on advanced medical research and interplanetary telemedicine. Their mission was to ensure no disease outbreak on Earth or on the fledgling Mars research colony went unnoticed. They were doctors, biologists, epidemiologists. Military confrontations were not part of their job description. She opened a secure line to Earth's newly formed Medical Defense Council, a specialized body that coordinated responses to pandemic threats, biological crises, and off-world medical needs. It included both top-tier medical scientists and high-level military liaisons. The calm expression of Colonel Raphael Owens flickered onto her screen, broad-shouldered and steely-eyed in a crisp uniform. He was well known for bridging the gap between humanitarian concerns and strategic defense. "Colonel," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "we have detected a large incoming fleet, unknown origin, heading from beyond Jupiter's orbit. They're not responding to any hails." Owens' face darkened. "You're certain they're not just merchant convoys or private explorers?" She transmitted the data. "Look at their formation, the velocity. It's too precise. This is a coordinated fleet, and it's not sending standard friendly signals." He exhaled. "Understood, Dr. Brooks. We'll keep you updated." That conversation took place 2 days before the disastrous events on Mars. During those 48 hours, Earth's leadership tried desperately to contact the unknown fleet. Nothing but silence. Then, in a sudden burst of electromagnetic activity, the entire fleet shifted course. Instead of heading straight to Earth, a contingent peeled away toward the Red Planet. On Mars, humanity maintained a semi-permanent colony with a crucial outpost dedicated to researching extraterrestrial microbes and pioneering advanced medical treatments for deep space explorers. The settlement was lightly defended, mostly scientists and doctors, never intended as a fortress. No one expected what happened next. The outpost distress call was short and abrupt. One frantic message: "We are under attack. Unidentified ships, enemy ground troops. They're inside. We have wounded." The transmission cut. All contact was lost. When reconnaissance drones tried to re-establish a link, they found only wreckage, charred structures, collapsed research domes, and no sign of survivors. Samples from the outpost databanks, including classified medical research, were missing. It was an unambiguous act of aggression. The shock reverberated across Earth. People had imagined the possibility of alien life, but had hoped for diplomacy or at least a cautious standoff. Instead, the first true contact was an assault on a medical facility, leading to catastrophic loss of life. The Medical Defense Council convened in an emergency session, bringing in the top brass from every major power. Colonel Owens chaired the meeting alongside leading scientific minds like Dr. Eliana Brooks, who had now become a key figure in analyzing the threat. They were joined by representatives from around the globe, generals, prime ministers, heads of state, but also heads of international health organizations and medical institutions. The enemy specifically targeted our researchers on Mars, Owens explained, scanning the room. They destroyed labs, took critical medical data, and left no survivors. The question is, why target a medical outpost? An older general in the corner cleared his throat. Perhaps they see doctors as easy targets. Or maybe they realize that by crippling our medical capacity, they can weaken us in the long run. Either way, Dr. Brooks said, they've shown their willingness to commit atrocities against noncombatants. We have to assume any hospital or medical station on Earth could be next. In the hush that followed, the scenario sank in. Targeting hospitals was not just a military strategy. It was psychological warfare, a statement of cruelty, a dismantling of hope. Then Colonel Owens spoke again. We must be prepared. As some of you know, Earth has a specialized cadre within our combined armed forces. Combat medics who receive advanced medical training and also master tactical warfare. We call them the Angels of Mercy, or, in more foreboding terms, the Angels of Death. They are the embodiment of a paradox. They save lives, and they know exactly how to end them when necessary. Eyes turned to a young woman seated near the back. Lieutenant Mai Nakamura, slender with a calm demeanor, wore the insignia of this elite group. She was in her mid-20s with short, cropped hair and quick, steady eyes. Her uniform had the familiar Red Cross emblem above her heart, but also a sidearm strapped to her thigh. She looked up, acknowledging the unspoken request. Sir, the 7th Combat Medic Brigade stands ready. Whatever these invaders have in mind, we won't let them terrorize our hospitals. No one wanted this fight. Yet Earth had no choice. Over centuries of conflict, humans had learned one bitter lesson. Sometimes healers had to become warriors. With that resolution, the meeting ended in an atmosphere of grim determination. 2 days later, the alien fleet arrived in Earth's orbit. Half of it, anyway. Intelligence suggested the other half remained stationed near Mars, presumably building a forward base. From Laennec Orbital Station, Dr. Brooks could see lines of massive ships drifting into position. She recognized the same silhouette as before, sleek, angular hulls that radiated an almost predatory design. On Earth's surface, global alarms were raised. Nations activated emergency protocols and civil defense units. But more importantly, the Medical Defense Council enforced a complete lockdown on major healthcare facilities. Civilian hospitals were quickly evacuated of non-critical patients, who were moved into improvised shelters deep underground or in safer zones. Combat medics were dispatched to every major hospital to fortify them, coordinate security, and stand ready for a fight. Among those assigned to the biggest facility in North America was Lieutenant Mai Nakamura. She landed on the rooftop helipad of St. Florence Medical Center in the heart of the city. The scene was surreal. Doctors and nurses rushing to move patients, administrators trying to keep order. Over the hospital intercom, urgent instructions guided staff to specialized wards behind reinforced walls. It felt more like a war zone than a place of healing. May and her small team set up a command post near the operating theaters. She flicked through holographic displays of building schematics, assigning vantage points, and designating safe corridors for evacuation. The overhead lighting flickered, a subtle reminder that the power grid might be compromised any second. One of May's teammates, Sergeant Haley Cruz, approached. Lieutenant, we have news from the Eastern Hemisphere. 3 alien landing craft hit an international medical research center near Shanghai. Casualties are mounting. Another group struck a trauma hospital in Berlin. The pattern is the same. They storm in, kill the staff, and vanish. Their approach is horrifyingly methodical. May nodded, her face grim. They're dismantling our medical infrastructure, just like they did on Mars. They want to cripple our capacity to treat the wounded. Spread fear. Sergeant Cruz swallowed. What's our plan if they come here? The young lieutenant allowed herself a brief moment to recall her training. The night spent studying alien physiologies, advanced first aid for unknown species, and battlefield surgery. She also remembered the combat drills, live-fire exercises combined with triage simulations, teaching them to shift from saving a life to taking one in a split second. "We hold this hospital," she said. "We'll fortify the critical wards, protect patients and staff, and if they dare breach these walls, we show them why we're called the Angels of Death." Overhead, the sky darkened. The alien ships blocked out portions of the sun, their forms massive and ominous. Within minutes, sirens wailed through the city. Alert bulletins on every channel urged citizens to take shelter. They could see droves of people on the streets below, scurrying to find safety as smaller craft descended. She lifted her radio. "All teams, eyes on the sky. We have inbound enemy vessels. This is not a drill." The first explosions rocked the outskirts of the city. Plumes of smoke rose where once stood smaller clinics or field infirmaries. May's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to remain the steady hand. Then it happened. 3 alien assault crafts approached St. Florence Medical Center. They hovered for a moment, and from their belly ramps, strange shapes leaped onto the rooftop. The Krylon Dominion had arrived. That was the name gleaned from a single intercepted transmission, a guttural, harsh language their linguists had only begun to decipher. The armored figures scanned the area, advanced rifles at the ready. They clearly expected minimal resistance from medical staff. Their surprise was immediate when half a dozen combat medics sprang from behind cover. May led the way, raising a specialized sidearm loaded with tranquilizer rounds tuned to Krylon physiology, a projectile that could disrupt neuromuscular function if it penetrated that chitin-like exoskeleton. The Krylon troopers returned fire, but the medics had the advantage of both strategic positioning and knowledge of vital points. Rounds exchanged in sizzling arcs. May fired twice, hitting the lead trooper in the shoulder. He staggered, muscles spasming. One of May's comrades took a grazing shot to the leg, but quickly jabbed herself with a coagulant stim, stopping the bleeding. That was the difference with these soldiers. They were medical experts of the highest caliber. They knew how to treat an injury mid-battle. They also knew where to aim. Within minutes, for Krylon lay unconscious, another 3 retreated, lobbing grenades as they fled back to their craft. On the street level, however, more Krylon poured in, launching a direct assault on the building's lower floors. Civilians, paramedics, and volunteers scrambled to barricade doors. In a stroke of cunning, the aliens directed heavy fire at the ambulance bays, tried to collapse the supports, and trap everyone inside. May's squad had to split. She pressed a finger to her earpiece, instructing half to reinforce the ground floor, while she and Sergeant Cruz tried to intercept the aliens moving through the corridors. Corridor by corridor, the Krylon advanced with lethal discipline. The hospital's pristine white walls were scorched, bullet holes pocked the ceiling, and gurneys lay overturned. Lying in the hallway were frightened orderlies and security guards who had tried to hold them off. At the end of one corridor, May saw an older nurse crumpled on the floor. She dashed forward, sliding to a knee. The nurse still had a faint pulse. May whipped out her kit, injecting a stabilizer. She had a gash across the man's torso. In a typical war zone, you'd drag the wounded behind cover, but there was no time. The Krylon turned the corner and opened fire. Bullets pinged the tiled floor near her. She hissed, ducking her head. Sergeant Cruz returned fire from behind a shattered doorway. "Hang on," May told the unconscious nurse. She calmly finished applying a clotting agent, then grabbed her rifle. She fired a burst, striking 2 Krylon. One dropped, convulsing from the specialized toxin. The second caught a bullet to the neck seal of its armor, letting out an unearthly growl before collapsing. The corridor fell quiet. Even so, no lull could be taken for granted. She called for medical backup to evacuate the nurse, then pivoted to continue clearing the floor. The next hour was a blur of close-quarters combat, improvised triage stations, and frantic radio updates from other corners of the city. Similar battles raged worldwide, Every major hospital became a front line. Some fell swiftly, the staff slaughtered before help arrived. Others, where combat medics had been deployed, resisted fiercely. News broadcasts captured images that shocked the world. Doctors and nurses returning fire from behind rows of hospital beds, using advanced medical knowledge to subdue Krylon soldiers. The public fear was immense, but also something unexpected happened. Nations that once bickered over borders or resources put aside differences. The moment they saw healers under attack, Earth united in a way it never had before. The condemnation of the Krylon Dominion was universal. In a sealed command center beneath the city, Colonel Owens coordinated the planet-wide defense. Holographic maps glowed in front of him, each pinpointing a crucial medical site. He had squads of combat medics on standby, ready to redeploy to any hospital that requested urgent backup. St. Florence is holding, an aide reported. Lieutenant Nakamura repelled the incursion on the rooftop and is now controlling the main corridors. Good, Owens said, scanning for updates. What about the Berlin General Hospital? I heard they were overwhelmed. A second aide shook her head grimly. Multiple casualties. The Krylon targeted the ICU with heavy ordnance. Survivors are calling for immediate evac, but no route is safe. Owens' knuckles tightened around the table's edge. Dispatch the 3rd Medic Regiment. If they can't get in by land, they go in by air. Show the world these monsters won't break our spirit. Meanwhile, in the heat of that chaos, Dr. Eliana Brooks wrestled with a different challenge. She wasn't stationed in a hospital, but remained on Lanek Orbital Station. From there, she analyzed every scrap of data about the Krylon. Preliminary findings indicated reptilian humanoid physiology with an exoskeletal shell, heightened muscle density, and a distinct vulnerability to specific nerve agents. If Earth could engineer a non-lethal compound that incapacitated them, it might prevent the widespread bloodshed. She worked day and night, scanning captured Krylon's biological samples from the few subdued in the initial battles. At last, success. A specialized neurotoxin that caused short-term paralysis. She named it ND7. Within hours, the formula was transmitted to Earth's medical labs and production facilities. By the next morning, thousands of ND7 aerosol canisters were prepared for immediate deployment by squads of combat medics. Earth, for all its fractious politics, could mobilize with breathtaking speed when threatened at its core. That was precisely what Tuong Clivar, the Krylon commanding officer, had underestimated. He stood in the cargo hold of his flagship, flanked by subcommanders reporting from battle sites across the planet. They spoke in their guttural tongue, describing unexpected resistance from small squads of healer warriors that inflicted heavy casualties among Krylon raiders. Clivar seethed with disbelief. Impossible. These humans are disorganized, hardly unified. Their civilization still squabbles over trivial issues. How can they mount such a cohesive defense? A subcommander's voice trembled. They have dedicated teams that combine medical skills and advanced tactical knowledge. They fight differently, targeting our anatomical weak points with uncanny precision. They even treat our wounded. Clivar roared. Treat our wounded? What madness is this? They show mercy yet fight like devils. We must strike back harder. No half measures. He ordered a larger offensive, a simultaneous assault on multiple hospitals across the planet, intending to overload the humans' capacity to defend them all. On the next day, wave after wave of Krylon dropships descended. The scale of the assault took entire cities hostage. Ordinary civilians, trapped and afraid, huddled in basements or makeshift shelters. Exhausted doctors and nurses tried to keep up with the flood of casualties, while the combat medics scrambled from one hot spot to the next, distributing ND7 aerosol grenades or specialized bullets. Soon the tide shifted. Reports poured in of Krylon squads collapsing mid-fight, incapacitated by carefully engineered toxins. Instead of shooting to kill, Earth's medics shot to paralyze. Outside St. Florence Medical Center, a column of Krylon reinforcements arrived in heavy assault vehicles. They aimed cannons at the building, prepare to tear it down. Mai Nakamura, now commanding nearly 50 combat medics from different units, orchestrated a cunning plan. She lured the Krylon forces onto a main street that had been rigged with remote aerosol dispensers. At her signal, canisters of ND-7 hissed, and the Krylon troopers faltered, many collapsing behind their own vehicle hulls. One of them, apparently higher-ranked, wore ornate armor plating and refused to succumb. He fought free of gas, charging toward the hospital entrance. May confronted him in hand-to-hand combat, ducking a savage blow from his rifle, but she twisted around, driving a stunned baton into a seam in his armor. The electricity jacked his nervous system, and he convulsed, dropping to his knees. She pinned him to the ground, injecting a sedative. This was the moment that would appear on countless news broadcasts. A single, determined combat medic subduing a Krylon commander with medical instruments that could either heal or harm. Not all battles went so smoothly. The Krylon had powerful weaponry, and some hospitals fell. Others burned. Thousands of innocent lives were lost. But the invasion, initially so bold and confident, began to falter in the face of Earth's unified response. Krylon's strategy had assumed that by attacking doctors, they would shatter morale. Instead, they ignited a global solidarity. Where there had been borders, there were now open lines of communication. Governments shared intelligence instantly, militaries pooled resources, and perhaps most importantly, medical staff worldwide united under a single banner. We protect life, no matter the cost. In the battered corridors of St. Florence, nurses and surgeons stepped over broken glass and twisted metal, continuing to operate on wounded patients. Combat medics formed a perimeter in the main lobby, scanning for any sign of Krylon infiltration. The place reeked of chemicals and scorched wiring. Every so often, the intercom crackled as staff requested supplies or called for help. And always, Lieutenant Mai Nakamura was at the center of it, ensuring both safety and care. 3 days into the invasion, the Krylon offensive stalled. Tuon Clivar's frustration boiled over. He threatened to deploy more destructive measures, perhaps orbital bombardments. But with so many of his troops stranded on Earth, crippled by ND-7 or pinned down by combat medics, he couldn't simply incinerate them from orbit. While he raged, Colonel Owens and Dr. Brooks quietly advanced their next move. From Lanek Orbital Station, Dr. Brooks had discovered an even more potent yet still non-lethal approach, interfering with the Krylon's respiratory system by releasing a specialized aerosol in the upper atmosphere, designed to be harmless to humans but disabling to Krylon. It sounded unthinkable, weaponizing Earth's environment, but she believed it might be the key to ending the invasion quickly. Owens, after consulting with global leaders, gave the green light. Earth's priority was to protect the hospitals and rescue the wounded, not wage a protracted war. A network of high-altitude drones deployed the engineered aerosol, drifting it into layers of the atmosphere. As Clivar prepared another wave of planetary assaults, large swathes of Krylon troopers began experiencing crippling respiratory spasms. Their advanced suits tried to compensate, but soon malfunctioned due to the Earth-specific composition. They stumbled and were promptly captured by combat medics, who, ironically, treated them so they wouldn't suffocate. Footage of that compassion went viral across the planet, fueling something akin to grudging admiration among some Krylon troops who witnessed it. Clivar could no longer deny the inevitable. His flagship, massive, shaped like a spearhead, maintained low Earth orbit to coordinate the ground forces. But it was now swarmed by Earth's improvised orbital defense craft, many retrofitted for medevac ships. The Krylon gunners hesitated to fire on these clearly marked medical vessels, uncertain if they might be violating some cosmic law or if it was a ruse. By the time they realized Earth had no qualms about turning ambulances into attack craft, it was too late. The Krylon flagship faced a blockade of determined medics, each vessel armed with powerful EMP charges. When Clivar finally received word that hundreds of his warriors had been captured alive and were being held in specialized wards, He was dumbfounded. "They do not slaughter us," he muttered to his subcommanders. "Why? They can, yet they choose otherwise." No one had an answer, but soon the reality was clear. Earth was not driven by the Krylon philosophy of conquest. Earth wanted the Krylon to leave. The repeated message, "Withdraw your forces, and we will provide medical care for your wounded. Continue this war, and we will defeat you." Clivar, battered by fiasco after fiasco, had little choice but to open negotiations. Thus, on the fifth day, an uneasy ceasefire settled across the planet. Combat medics guarded makeshift detention wards where captured Krylon soldiers lay paralyzed or sedated, being treated for injuries. Cameras rolled as Dr. Brooks herself walked through the triage area, ensuring the aliens were stabilized. The world watched, and though tragedy and destruction were everywhere, there was also a spark of hope. Maybe a future existed where Earth's healers would lead the way forward, not just in saving human lives, but possibly bridging the gap between species. Clivar descended in a shuttle under heavy guard to a secure government facility near what had once been a bustling city center. Now it was a patchwork of rubble and field hospitals. Colonel Owens, Dr. Brooks, Lieutenant Nakamura, and several leaders from around the globe awaited him. He was tall by human standards, clad in battered black armor. 2 unarmed Krylon attendants accompanied him. He bristled at the sight of so many armed humans, especially the ones with red crosses on their uniforms. Colonel Owens spoke first. "Tuon Clivar, we are prepared to end hostilities on the following terms: immediate withdrawal of all Krylon forces from Earth's orbit, the safe return of any medical research you stole from Mars, and a guarantee that you will never again target healthcare facilities. Do you agree?" Clivar scowled, glancing at his attendants. "You have proven more formidable than we anticipated. This approach, turning your doctors into warriors, it is an abomination in our eyes." Mai Nakamura took a step forward, voice unwavering. "We don't see it that way. We swore to do no harm to those who need healing. But when invaders threaten our patients, our healers, we become the deadliest force imaginable, because we know exactly how fragile life can be." A tense silence lingered. Clivar stared at them, his reptilian eyes flicking over the rank insignias, the weapons. "Why did you spare my warriors? You had them at your mercy." Dr. Brooks lifted her chin. "Because we're not your executioners. We're doctors, medics, soldiers. Our war is to protect life, not extinguish it. But make no mistake, Tuon Clivar, if you continue to threaten our healers, we'll show you just how lethal our knowledge can be." His gaze dropped. In his mind, perhaps, he saw the unstoppable tide of ND7, the sight of Krylon troopers choking, and the indignity of them being saved by human hands. Slowly, he nodded. "We will withdraw, but you must also release our people." Owens gave a curt nod. "We will, after they've recovered from their injuries. We suggest you share with them what you've learned here, that Earth will not tolerate any assault on our medical facilities." That agreement set in motion a planet-wide sigh of relief. The battered remains of the Krylon fleet broke orbit, collecting as many of their ground forces as they could. Over the next week, they limped back out of the solar system, taking with them the memory of an enemy that defied all expectations. Earth began the slow process of cleaning up the wreckage, burying the dead, and rebuilding the destroyed hospitals. Lieutenant Mai Nakamura found no solace in victory celebrations, though there were many who hailed her as a hero. She wandered the halls of St. Florence Medical Center, now heavily damaged. From the trauma wards came the groans of the injured, both human and Krylon. She paused at a row of alien patients lying on improvised beds, each one with tubes delivering sedatives. They had come here to exterminate Earth's doctors, yet these same doctors were healing them. "How are they doing, Lieutenant?" asked a nurse approaching with a clipboard. May pressed her lips together. "Stable. A few are conscious but disoriented. I'm not sure how they'll react when they realize they're receiving the same care we give our own." She looked at the quiet, battered figures and felt a complex swirl of emotions. She had seen them slaughter nurses and surgeons, yet she would have given her life to protect them now that they lay helpless. That was her oath, after all. And paradoxically, that was the reason the Krylon lost. They never understood that protecting life was Earth's greatest strength. She inhaled, remembering how frightened she was during the first firefight, trying to save a nurse while bullets whizzed by. That fear never left, but it guided her to act decisively. She realized it was not bravery that made her stand firm, but duty and empathy, the duty to care for another life, human or otherwise. Days passed. The media recounted countless stories of heroism. Surgeons who operated under fire, medics who shielded patients with their own bodies, entire hospital staffs who barricaded doors and held out until relief arrived. People around the globe donated supplies, volunteered to rebuild. A new perspective emerged. Countries that had once argued over treaties and trade found common ground in the shared trauma. The idea spread that Earth's healers, once attacked, had shown a unity no invasion force could break. Meanwhile, Tuong Clivar's last parting gift before his departure was a dire warning. He mentioned that the Krylon Dominion was vast, and not all among them would accept this defeat gracefully. That Earth should prepare for retribution. But Colonel Owens calmly informed him that Earth was already preparing. They would not be caught off guard again. The doctors who went to the front lines would remain on alert, continuing to develop advanced techniques to protect what they cherished most, the sanctity of life. Even so, the planet did not close itself off. At Dr. Brooks' urging, Earth's leaders broadcast a message across the stars. We are willing to engage in peaceful exchange. We have advanced medical knowledge to share. But be warned, if you come seeking to harm our healers, you will meet a force unlike any you have encountered. In the aftermath, Dr. Brooks returned to Laennec Orbital Station to oversee the salvage of data from the bombed Mars outpost. She found that some research survived, crucial breakthroughs in anti-radiation therapy and immunotherapy for cosmic viruses. She made it her mission to continue that work, ensuring future generations would benefit. She hoped that maybe, if the Krylon or other civilizations took notice, it would be a reason to engage in dialogue rather than war. Lieutenant May Nakamura remained at St. Florence, helping with reconstruction. She insisted on returning to the battered wards every morning, checking on the staff who survived. The main atrium was still heavily damaged, with collapsed beams and blackened walls. Crews worked round the clock to make the space functional again. But every time she walked through, she remembered the first day the Krylon arrived. The fear, the gunfire, the frantic scramble to protect patients. She remembered the quiet after the final gunshot, standing in a hallway strewn with rubble and moaning wounded, telling herself, "Don't cry yet. There's more to do." Sometimes reporters cornered her, asking for a statement. They wanted a face for humanity's improbable victory. They wanted an icon, the young medic who led the defense of one of the largest hospitals in North America. She brushed them off politely, focusing on her tasks. The real heroes, she felt, were the ordinary nurses who stayed by their patients' sides when the bombs fell, or the surgeons who operated by flashlight in half-collapsed operating rooms. They never had the option to pick up a weapon and fight back. They just kept saving lives anyway. One evening, she took a moment to sit outside the hospital, leaning against a temporary wall. The city skyline was dark in places where the power grid had yet to be restored. Overhead, the stars sparkled more brightly than she remembered, as though she were seeing them for the first time. The planetary shield that had once seemed an abstract concept was now real, tested, and proven. She closed her eyes, replaying the last week in her mind. The fear, the adrenaline, the sorrow for those lost. She thought of a phrase her old mentor, a retired combat medic, had told her, "We who heal can also kill. That is the burden we bear. We know every artery, every organ, every delicate system that keeps a living being alive. In caring for the sick, we learn how to destroy. The question is whether we have the discipline never to abuse that power." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She hoped they had used their power wisely. She hoped the message reached beyond Earth, that any would-be conquerors would realize that attacking healers was the surest way to unite humanity in unstoppable fury. The angels of mercy and death were now etched into galactic history. And so, the invasion passed into memory as historians documented it, the Krylon assault of Earth. The casualty numbers were high, and the devastation to Earth's infrastructure immense. But it changed humanity. As reconstruction moved forward, humanitarian efforts soared. Scientists like Dr. Brooks worked tirelessly to push the boundaries of medical research, aided by the data gleaned from captured Krylon technology. Colonel Owens spearheaded a permanent global initiative ensuring all hospitals had specialized squads of combat medics. Every corner of Earth would be prepared should any new threat dare to repeat Krylon's mistake. Months later, as the final wards of St. Florence reopened, the city gathered to honor the medical personnel who had made a stand there. An impromptu stage was set up in front of the restored facade, the Red Cross emblem shining anew. People from every walk of life came to pay their respects: volunteers, city officials, other combat medics from across the planet. Colonel Owens gave a speech about courage, resilience, and compassion. Dr. Eliana Brooks spoke by video uplink from orbit, highlighting how advanced medicine had become Earth's greatest weapon and also its greatest gift. When Mai Nakamura was called up, the applause thundered. She stepped onto the stage with measured steps. She wore her dress uniform, the Red Cross, and a new medal pinned to her chest. The hush grew as everyone waited for her to speak. She gripped the microphone stand, scanning the crowd. She saw the haunted expressions of some survivors, the bandaged arms and legs of those still healing. She saw children who had come to see the hero who protected their hospital. She saw fellow medics standing at attention, proud but tired, each carrying their own scars. Then she cleared her throat. "The day our enemy arrived," she said, "they believed that by striking our healers first, they'd break our spirit. They assumed that medicine was our weakness. Instead, they discovered it was our strength. We learned how to defend life because we spend our entire careers studying it. Whether it's a virus or a bullet wound, we confront suffering every day. Maybe that's why the Krylon couldn't understand us. We don't just fight to win. We fight so that others can live." A quiet settled, people listening intently. "I'm no hero," May continued softly. "None of us in the Combat Medic Corps wanted to pick up arms. We wanted to help, to treat, to heal. But when we saw that our hospitals, our patients, and our fellow medics were threatened, we didn't hesitate. We did what we had to do. I truly hope it never happens again. But if someone out there thinks attacking our healers is a smart plan, let this serve as a warning. We will protect them with everything we've got. Because our oath to preserve life is exactly what makes us unstoppable in its defense." Tears shimmered in more than a few eyes, and the applause rose like a wave. With that, the ceremony concluded, but the memory lingered in every corner of Earth's consciousness. The invasion had scarred the planet, yes, but it also lit a fire of unity. News networks repeated the same phrase in various languages. First, they attacked our healers. Now, they meet the angels of death. It became a rallying cry, etched into songs, speeches, and academic lectures on human resilience. In time, Tuong Clivar's name receded into history, a symbol of arrogance undone by empathy and discipline. The Krylon Dominion's last known transmissions indicated internal turmoil, with some factions furious at the humiliating defeat and others quietly suggesting that maybe Earth could be a valuable ally or teacher. But that part was the Dominion's concern. Earth would remain vigilant. Late one night, as May wrapped up a shift in the newly rebuilt emergency wing, she paused by a window overlooking the city lights. She recalled how uncertain everyone had been about unifying the globe's medical and military assets. Yet the last few months had proven that synergy was possible and, in dire situations, essential. A beep on her communicator signaled her next assignment: a relief mission to a remote region still suffering from quake damage. Another humanitarian crisis, but at least it wasn't an alien invasion. She exhaled, relieved. Tomorrow, she would board a helicopter loaded with medical supplies. She would go back to what she loved most: healing. Though war might come again, for now, She was just a combat medic ready to treat injuries, calm frightened civilians, and maybe, if the day ever came, face down another would-be conqueror. She walked away from the window, her reflection disappearing into the hallway lights. Outside, the stars remained as they always had, beautiful and distant, full of possibilities. Perhaps beyond them, other species were watching, wondering if Earth was now too dangerous to attack. They could only hope that next time, first contact would be guided by open hands rather than loaded rifles. Still, one truth gleamed. If anyone dared to harm the planet's healers again, they would witness the transformation of compassion into unstoppable fury. No species that prized its doctors, nurses, and medics so highly would ever allow them to be sacrificed without unleashing a reckoning that would echo through the galaxy. And so ended the invasion that began with a vicious assault on the principle of healing, but concluded with an enduring testament to why humanity's greatest power lay in those who pledge first to do no harm, and, when pushed, become the angels of death.